Thank you. Dr. Frey, when we talked on the phone last week, I kind of hit you, I think, with a surprise. So I'm going to talk about the 2019 research paper, of which you were one of many of the authors, that laid out an ideal situation on college football tailgating, which would be a ban on idling, charcoal grills, and old generators. Well, we decided that this was not realistic, and you did tell me that you grill out at least 3 times a week.
I do.
And you are fuel agnostic. So thank you for clarifying that world-changing research paper, because, and I can imagine those South Carolina Gamecocks would not be for that either.
That's the only reason we go.
Yeah. Well, nor the wolf pack, to be honest.
Nor the wolf pack, yeah. Let's talk a little bit. You wrote a letter to the editor in the Raleigh News and Observer taking on the Clean Power Plan claims. And in the letter, you disputed assertions that the Clean Power Plan was, quote, an act of overreach. You're going to be dealing with this, and I would imagine are going to be asked to do research in this area. As we know, the Clean Power Plan has fallen, and there is speculation, at least we're hearing, that there's going to be something that comes in to fill the space. I guess, do you believe that EPA acted within its statutory authority when it issued the Clean Power Plan, and should EPA use the Clean Power Act to regulate a power plant's carbon dioxide emissions outside the fence line?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Capito. And obviously, carbon emissions from power plants are a substantial issue of national environmental interest. In my career, early in my career, as a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University, I did research with the U.S. Department of Energy laboratory in Morgantown, West Virginia, where I was doing techno-economic assessment of clean coal technologies. And I've done a little bit of work looking, for example, at carbon capture in some of my research as well. So I know this is an important issue. With regard to the letter that you reference, a colleague and I were mainly addressing what we viewed as just some factual issues in an op-ed that had been published a week or so earlier. So we weren't so much getting to the legal authority for the Clean Power Plan, and I do know that's an issue of robust debate on the part of multi-stakeholders. And certainly, if confirmed as an assistant administrator for the Office of Research and Development, it's really not my swim lane or space to weigh in on those legal policy issues. My commitment would be to lead ORD to provide the science that's needed to inform those kinds of decisions on the part of our partner program offices that would be considering those legal and policy issues.
So I would urge you, should you be in this position, that this is where the transparency aspect comes in. I mean, not to shield part of the research or part of the science that comes from maybe sometimes it doesn't say exactly what the policymakers want it to say. We know that happens frequently. Yeah. So I would just make that plea again for the transparency. Dr. Clyburn Reed, you mentioned 342 counties in the Crescent. As I spoke about in my opening statement, I have quite a bit of experience with the ARC and the great work can do. You said a couple of things in your opening statement that are important. First of all, was partnerships. A commission can't do it all. You have to work with your local, all up and down the spectrum from private to public entities. Okay. So that's good. The other thing I would say, you mentioned the persistent poverty counties of 92 counties. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to have to prioritize. Obviously, if you're starting anywhere, you've got to figure out where you can have the biggest bang for your buck, but also make the most, as you said, make the most of impact with what you have. Mm-hmm. Is that how you would prioritize in terms of the lowest poverty? I mean, I would recommend that myself, mm-hmm. I guess is what I'm saying. Start with the places that you can really make improvements on. And I liked your talk about broadband in answer to one of the questions, because that's one way I think that you can see measurable improvements. So have you thought about these 92 persistently poverty counties? I'm sure some are in South Carolina, not everywhere. And so how would you attack that kind of economic development issue?
Thank you for that question. And yes, those 92 counties are really concerning. That's a lot.
Right.
Okay. So first, as I've had a conversation with Gail Manchin in the Appalachian, I will have a conversation with her chief of staff as well as to how they go about prioritizing, and we would mirror our actions after what the ARC actually does. In looking at the needs of my state in particular, one size does not fit all, like I said before. So the grassroots level community leaders, this state, working with at the state level with the governor's office, we would come up with a plan that would be conducive to the state that we're in. And every state will be responsible for doing that, every governor. So we will look at 7 different plans, and then we will prioritize those particular counties first, and then move from there.
Well, I would imagine with your background as an educator, you have a good reach into that aspect of persistent poverty. What's the education availabilities, levels, and all those kinds of things that I think probably contribute to some of the factors of the high poverty levels. Thank you. Dr. Frey, I wanted to ask you, I mentioned in my opening statement that there is no nominee for the Office of Air and Radiation. If there were a nominee, I would ask this nominee this question as well. But apparently Joe Goffman, who is the current unconfirmed head of the Air Office, has said that the administration is working on an initiative regarding the power sector. So that leads us all to guess. What is that? It could be a suite of regulations to drive down carbon dioxide emissions by squeezing the power sector through regulations on issues other than carbon dioxide, like emissions, water, waste, and the net effect being to force coal and perhaps natural gas plants to not only reduce operations but possibly close. Are you aware of this initiative that's going on under his leadership, and for which, have you provided research assistance on this?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Capito. Yeah, of course, it's the role of ORD to provide scientific support and advice and information to support the work of our program offices. And ORD, for example, has a capability to do energy mix modeling and life cycle analysis, and also to look at the health effects related to the operations of the energy sector. So these would be the kinds of support that we can provide. And certainly there are discussions within the agency on initiatives, but as far as specific details of what the Office of Air and Radiation is considering, I would have to defer to that office. Since our focus is on the science and not the policy. But I'd be happy to take your question back with me to the agency. Okay.
Well, I guess my question too was, to your knowledge at present, has this already involved the Office of ORD to bring forward specific studies that would help with this regulatory goal? Or you're not aware, you want to get back to me on that?
I think I would want to get back to you on that to give you an accurate answer.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Also, the Office of Research and Development oversees the Integrated Risk Information Center, known as IRIS. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yes. The IRIS program, and I guess you must have been alluding to this a little bit, the health hazards of certain chemicals, hazard assessments are then used to help health standards. This is an issue that I'm very concerned about as it relates to the PFAS issue. The GAO has criticized EPA for the length of time to complete a IRIS hazard assessment. The agency has been further criticized for the lack of usefulness of some of those assessments. Could you describe to me how you could modernize this system and this program to respond to some of the previous criticism?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yeah, the IRIS program has been with the agency for well more than a decade, I think longer than that. And in my own career, in addition to the service I've had on EPA advisory committees, I've served on a number of National Academy of Science bodies, including the Board of Environmental Studies and Toxicology, that's done a number of studies that oversee and provide advice and peer review of IRIS. So I know that over the years, IRIS has undergone maturation as a result of the expert peer review advice from the National Academies. In recent years, the staff have modernized approaches on things that we call systematic evidence mapping and related techniques for assessing the overall body of evidence, and this has been based on recommendations from the National Academy of Science. We also are very mindful that, in using resources for this program, we need to complement and not be duplicative of any other resource use in the agency. And so we do coordinate very closely with our partners in the program offices. IRIS assessments do serve the needs of science, of really all of the regulatory programs, the air, water, land, and chemicals offices. And we work very closely with the programs as well as the EPA regions to understand for what chemicals do they see a need for assessment, so that when we do an assessment, it's on a chemical for which they need information that serves a practical purpose.
All right, thank you.